I'm just waiting to see if Judy and Brooke are back on yet.
Brooke's here.
Oh, I'm here.
I'm
Okay.
here.
And Judy made it too. All right. So one of the things we wanted to caucus about was for me to ask Brooke if he had additional information regarding Bill, and we have nothing new. I think everyone in your shop knows that Bill was hospitalized after a fall about 3 or 4 weeks ago, had an inpatient stay and then a rehab stay following that. He got released from rehab and was back at home for a while and seemed to be doing well. And now he has been rehospitalized, and that's all we know. So we're kind of in a difficult spot, not the least of which is we just simply don't know what his circumstances are going to be over the coming days and weeks. But in Bill's absence, we do not have specific proposals or language or other material to put on the table for your consideration. If you have proposals or things, we'll certainly receive them, but literally we'll be receiving them and then reserving the opportunity to talk about them. If other than proposals, there are specific kinds of issues or concerns that you would like to talk about kind of informally today, rather than in a kind of technical bargaining context, we're certainly happy to do that as well as we can in Bill's absence. I think the only other thing that I'd want to mention right at the get-go is that, we continue to focus on areas that we're focusing on. We're looking at the fee problem and trying to figure out how to continue to provide the amount of fee relief that we have been providing up through the summer, in the fall and forward, but having to go back to the other device of doing that embedded in raises or in salary rather than as a separate action. So we're still working on that, and it's a struggle to kind of figure out what we can do and exactly how we can do it. We're not, there is no intention to renege on the commitment to help you with fees in the areas that we agreed to previously. We continue to look at Gator Grad Care and cost issues associated with Gator Grad Care, and we will have proposals in that area. And then the last one is we're trying to compose some language that we think will help ease and specify the grievance process. So those are the 3 areas that we're working on to be ready to put something forward, but we're not there as yet and don't know exactly when we will be given Bill's situation. So, long-winded hello.
Well, thank you, Paul. I understand that, this isn't what we all had planned, and we're just kind of rolling with the punches now. You've actually shed some light for us as to the fee issue. We've been trying to ascertain what just to apprise everyone, a couple of weeks ago, we were emailed by University Administration, by Bill, letting us know that the way that the fees are written in the contract are kind of maybe not allowed. We weren't quite sure what he was getting at. Paul's just notified us that, and our concern naturally was that perhaps this is an effort to kind of step back our efforts on fee relief. I'm happy to hear Paul mention that that's not the case at all. It sounds more like a structural issue and procedural issue than rather a substantive one. So thank you for that, Paul. I don't know how much more you know about the topic or how much you're willing to share publicly, but do you know, for instance, like what kind of authority prevents the university from paying or from relieving us of fees in the current way that it does?
Yeah, I don't. I just know that came from the bursar's office to Bill and to the rest of our team, saying that I think the language was state law prohibits, but I don't know whether it's literally law or if it's a regulation or if it's an interpretation of a regulation. We're chasing that a bit in response to, I think Bobby sent an email, I'm not sure. So we're trying to get some more definitive source on that. But we were just told by the Bursar's office that manages that, that it was not permitted. So and that precipitated the email that you guys got.
Okay, thank you. Let us know what you find. We want to take a look at that as well. And while we're on the topic of fees, this is not something that I think that will really develop during this bargaining session. But it is in response to the impact of a university decision. I think it was April 28th of this year, the Board of Trustees ratified a change to the fee structure that I think quite obviously reduces fees in areas where the university is going to be providing fewer amenities. Paying an athletic fee doesn't make a lot of sense if you don't have access to the gym for the entirety of summer and fall, right? It does include a reduction to the health and transportation fees that the university would cover on behalf of GAs, and includes the addition of a distance learning fee, I think, which equals out to about $20 per credit hour. Within that is an access fee, as I understand it. We don't have a proposal here today, but while we're mentioning what we're kind of considering for bargaining in the future, I guess I wanted to put you guys on notice. It's something that we're looking at. Just generally, I think what the university would pay on behalf of GAs with this change decreases from about 30% to 14%. That's a very rough estimate. And the addition of a distance learning fee for graduate assistants, I think is a little problematic, to say the least, in the sense that, one, many GAs use the summer to take research credits, so they may not need access to some of these online materials, at least for the purposes of completing coursework. They might need Zoom to, I work in a research lab. I do research on campus as opposed to off campus, and we needed to Zoom for our lab meetings or for traditional meetings with my PI one-on-ones. But additionally, on top of GAs using that time for research credits, many of them are, as you know, we talk about this pretty much every year. Many of them are PhD candidates who aren't taking substantive coursework anymore. And a lot of them are TAs. A lot of them are using those materials to teach the classes in compliance with university mandates. It's kind of like asking teachers to pay for their chalk and erasers. So it's something that it's a little, it feels like a step backwards for us. I understand why the university's made some of those proposals in regards to reduction of fees. But I guess I wanted to just kind of put you on notice that it's something that we're looking at. It's something that is probably going to affect at least MOU bargaining, potentially regular bargaining, depending on, what things look like in Florida in a couple months. So I'll take the time to mention that. Paul, before
what do I do? Do I just pull up? Huh? Okay. Thank you.
If you're, I'm going to ask if you're not on mute, if you could please mute yourself. Thank you. Paul, last we left off, after our last bargaining session, the university actually did make a proposal for the memorandum of understanding. We've reviewed it. I don't know if you wanted an additional opportunity to speak on that. I'm prepared to. I can share my screen with that MOU if my computer cooperates. Here we go. I think this is it. Okay, I'm going to try to do that. I'm not technologically savvy. Oh, and I'm not able to screen share. Becky, are you still with us?
Yeah, I gave, I think it was Andrea. She's the host now.
Okay. Okay. Andrea, do you have that? Okay, I'm getting a nod. That's a good sign.
Which MOU, the
The university's proposal. It's about it's a little over 2 pages.
I did not, yeah, can you send it to me? I did not download it.
Totally. I will say some general comments while everyone's kind of waiting on us. I think that this is a step in the right direction in many ways, and I'm willing to go over them with everyone. I'm aware that the faculty and the administration recently reached a tentative agreement, and we've taken a look at that as well. For what it's worth, just discussing the climate of kind of unions and MOU efforts across the state of Florida. USF and Florida State have also come to some kind of agreement with their administration. So makes me confident, given what the university's proposed with us and kind of how things are headed just around the state, that we can come to an agreement. I think this is a lot farther beyond where we were on day one. Hopefully you'll see what I'm talking about in a second, once I can pass this along to Andrea.
Got it. I'm about to open it. Can everyone see this?
I can, yes.
I can see it as well.
So the MOUs proposed by the Board of Trustees retains a lot of the language we suggested, like regarding notice. I think that's a very easy thing to kind of request. And we noticed that the performance evaluation section largely mirrors what the university has agreed to with the faculty union. I think that since this proposal was made, some things were added to the performance evaluation section with the faculty. Generally, I like a few things. I like that it gives us the opportunity to let me minimize my screen here so that I can pull up my document. I did notice in the preamble, actually, let me take a few steps back. In the preamble, I think it mentions that this pertains to GAU membership, but it should actually, I think, for instance, section 1, it says the university agrees to provide copies to all such changes that impact GAU membership. I think that should reflect the bargaining unit instead, or GA wages, terms and conditions of employment, what the law kind of gives us governance when it comes to mandatory bargaining about. If it just applies to GAU membership, that's like a quarter of the bargaining unit. So just a minor detail there. Before we had put in a duration clause, saying that the MOU will kind of parallel the Florida state governor's decision about when we were undergoing a state emergency. I'm fine with removal of the duration clause. I actually think it's a better idea, so that we are more flexible and able to kind of adapt to the situation as a whole. I didn't have any issues with sections 2 or 3, or the union didn't have any issues with sections 2 or 3. Now going to 4, and I know that the university's made clear that this is something that they're not they don't want to surrender a lot of their prerogative here, and the union understands. The union doesn't want to protect GAs that are doing a bad job. It doesn't think that there are a lot of GAs doing a bad job. We think there's a lot of GAs doing a good job given the circumstances. The MOU provides that the university will instruct supervisors to consider the impacts of COVID-19. That's appropriate, but that's limited to spring 2020. Again, this proposal was offered up over a month ago, but we'd like to extend that into summer 2020. That's the first paragraph of section 4. I like that any canceled presentations or invitations can be added to the GA's file for consideration when it comes to performance evaluation. I think that's appropriate. And that with the last paragraph, I think it's very positive that the university is considering allowing GAs to offer up a statement regarding adverse impacts they've had as a result of COVID-19. When we first met, it was a very big concern to us. We were concerned about the GA who suffered some kind of academic slowdown because of COVID-19. If someone is hospitalized for days or weeks, or has some kind of immunocompromised condition, we don't want them to be punished as a result of something that they can't control. So we do like the third paragraph. My comment on it was I think that this should also extend. It's limited to teaching, research, scholarship, creative activity. We think that this should also shield those GAs who are suffering, academically as a result of COVID-19. And we can be very specific about that. Obviously you can argue that to some extent, everyone's been academically impacted by this. This has made things harder for everyone. We as a union are concerned about the GA who has to go seek treatment as a result of COVID-19, and their grades slip, which is kind of it's not unheard of, or who has to care for a dependent who is being hospitalized for COVID-19. So I think that the third paragraph goes a long way in giving GA some protection against the health emergency. We would like to see it go a step further and offer protection for students who are academically affected by the disease. And on this note, on the note of performance evaluations, I talked about USF and FSU having signed their MOUs. Just for comparison, their language is a lot stronger than what UF is currently proposing to us. Let me pull that up here. I don't know if you're capable of sharing that stuff, Andrea. It's okay. It's not major for us, but I do have. I'll read some of that language.
If you send me things, I can show them. Yeah, just send them along.
Well, I think I've got it in my notes here. So FSU the administration agreed not to terminate or fail to reappoint based on failure to maintain satisfactory student status or make appropriate progress if that failure is a direct result of the COVID-19 emergency period. I think that's strong language. I think it's precise language. It puts an onus on the GA to prove that their failure to make progress is a direct result of COVID-19, not a proximal result. Not that COVID-19 was part of a recipe of things that went wrong for them, specifically as a result of the COVID-19 emergency period. I don't think that's a huge ask. The last kind of feature about Section 4 that I think would really help us seal negotiations. We had mentioned in the union's previous proposal, protection for GAs who make a good faith effort to enact remote instruction on behalf of the university. The concern is the GA who may not have the technical prowess or the technical materials to enact instruction as envisioned by the university, but makes a good faith effort, right? Again, we're not trying to protect someone who's shirking their duties. I don't think that's really a problem, that's rampant or really present. But we don't want a GA who has trouble with Zooming with their class to be punished, even though they've downloaded, they've kept their updates up, that kind of thing. Again, I think that this would affect a very small number of GAs. But it would offer some significant protection, and it would give us a lot of ease going into the workplace and fulfilling our duties. I'm moving on to section 5. And I'm sorry, I'm not following along on the Zoom. I'm looking at my own little cheat sheet here with notes. I like the language in 5. You know, I think that what we offered before was a bit more expansive, but I think that permitting remote work and adjusting assignments and responsibilities where feasible is appropriate language. You know, some people have to go into the lab. I think that the university's done a good job of, you know, requiring that laboratories or PIs come up with their own research plan and working with the dean. That's kind of assuaged our fears a little bit about people coming into work unnecessarily. I think that the section 5 language is reasonable. I'm prepared to move on to section 6 unless anyone has any comments. Regarding late fees, this was proposed back, I think, maybe in late March or early April. So we'd probably request changing this language to suspend the imposition of late fees for any payments until maybe about August 11th, 2020, which is the degree certification date for summer semester, or the summer semesters rather, since there's 3 of them. I like section 7, you know, it's kind of goes back to tying into notice, but I think a lot of GAs just want to be assured that they can have reasonable parking accommodations and not have to traverse campus if their lab is, you know, in one corner and they have to park in the other. And I think sections 8 and 9 are truisms, I called them before. It's nice to see that the university assert those things. So that will kind of end my review of the proposal. I will give Paul and Brooke and Judy an opportunity to respond. I raised that they're potentially in our next proposal for the MOU. We're going to consider the new fee structure, which again, when we had set a meeting for this, this had just been passed by the Board of Trustees. It's a new impact to bargain over. And one last thing I want to mention before I give the floor to someone else. In the FSU and USF contracts, there's language where the university recognizes that a GA terminated for lack of funds because of the COVID-19 health emergency, right? Very specific reason, would be eligible for unemployment benefits under, I think it's not the CARES Act. Maybe it's the Families First Act. Let me take a look before I just kind of say something here. But basically the recent federal legislation that expands unemployment benefits. Let's see here. It's the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act. I think that this is another truism again. I think that, you know, the law already gives us that protection, but if the university is willing to put it into writing in the MOU, it suggests to us that it's not going to fight in paying those benefits to someone who I think by law might deserve them. So that's what our next proposal might look like. Obviously, I have not caucused with my body. Maybe they like the proposal as written, and we will certainly be doing that after this session. But that's just kind of our thoughts as a bargaining committee, as union leadership about the university's proposal. I'll reiterate, you know, I've talked about some things we can do to, I think, make it stronger. But overall, I think that the spirit of this document is certainly in the right direction, and I think we are much, much closer to a tentative agreement on the COVID-19 MOU than we were when it was suggested that we might not need an MOU at all. So that's enough out of me. Paul, Brooke, Judy, if you'd like to respond or make any comments, we'd certainly like to hear them.
So I will just say that nothing you've said in the last 10 minutes, Javier, gives me enormous heartburn. So I think what we would be looking for is kind of a marked up version of this document. And I'd also like, as an appendix to that marked up version, you know, photocopies or appropriate pages from the other MOUs. That would be helpful, I think. The one comment I would make is that by virtue of just the pressures of calendar, we've kind of gotten ourselves into a spot where part of the language in the MOU was specifically targeted to being responsive to that portion of the emergency that was a sudden transition starting in March from an in-person environment to an online environment and to other kinds of impacts on our lives. And I think the university has tried to separate that the trauma of transition from the reality starting in the summer and presumably extending into the fall, although we don't know for sure yet, of online offerings that are intended, planned, structured, designed from the get-go, are known to be in an electronic environment rather than in a face-to-face environment. So there may be spots in here where the intent was to be supportive and positive. I mean, there's nothing problematic about this, with specific targeting to the transition rather than to a kind of normal state of affairs in which things are being delivered online. So with that caveat, I'll again reiterate, nothing you've said scares the bejesus out of me. That would be a technical term. You know, so if we can get a marked up copy and the documentation from the other MOUs, we'll respond as promptly as we can. Brooke, I know you spoke a little bit with Ryan regarding the development of this. Have you anything further?
No, I don't have anything to add specifically. I think what Paul said, I'm in agreement with. Specifically, the reference you made to unemployment at the end. Obviously, if someone would be eligible, we would not interfere with that process to attempt to make them ineligible. That area does fall under employee relations for employment, unemployment, re-employment assistance, as the state refers to it. So,
I'm sorry, I'm gonna, just because I don't want to miss this opportunity here. So, Brooke, are you saying that if anybody is laid off by the university as a result of this and applies for re-employment insurance, the university will not contest the application?
Correct. If a person would be eligible based on the criteria established by the state, we would not contest that application.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul and Brooke, for your comments. Does anyone else, Judy, is there anything you'd like to add, or should we proceed?
No, nothing that I need to
Can
add.
I add something?
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead, Andrea.
You know, we've been trying to bargain this since March. So while, you know, everyone may feel like, you know, we now have more time to plan out these classes. I personally feel like the university has not really provided any resources of substance to graduate students. So please keep that in mind when you're coming up with this MOU that is really late.
Thank you, Andrea. Any other comments at this time? I don't think I'm hearing or seeing any.
Are we moving into talking about a regular CBA article now?
I was going to kind of just assure Paul and Brooke that just make sure that my to-do list is right. They're ready for us to propose something with the changes we discussed here. Nothing scares the bejesus out of Paul or Brooke. And they would like an appendix of other university MOUs in the state, kind of reflecting what I've said today. Is there anything else you would need from us, Paul, Brooke, or Judy? Do I have that right?
That's correct as far as I'm concerned with regards to the MOU.
Okay.
Before we transition to talking about the CBA, Paul, Brooke, and Judy, I was just wondering, and I don't mean to sound insensitive at all, but are there any contingency plans in place to ensure that future bargaining sessions are not delayed due to Bill's absence? I mean, I really don't want to be insensitive, but we also need to keep the ball rolling on MOU bargaining and the full book bargaining. So we're just sort of anxious to know if there are any contingency plans.
Yeah, no, we appreciate that and understand it, and we won't accuse you of insensitivity, Bobby. We just don't know, and hopefully we will know within a few days about a little bit more detail about exactly what Bill's medical circumstances are going to be. But we can't make contingency plans until we know that. He is the chief bargainer, and that remains the fact unless and until something changes in his work assignment due to his health conditions.
And if I could add, I agree. I don't think that's an insensitive question at all. And I know that you've invested a lot of time, and a number of people on this Zoom session today have invested a lot of their time today. I think as Dr. Duncan mentioned, there are some uncertainties, but this session, rather than canceling this session, we felt like this was a good opportunity to restart the conversation, not delay things further. And I think you've been able to provide us with a fairly comprehensive viewpoint about the MOU. So I think this is productive. What's going to happen going forward in terms of bill and schedules remains to be seen, but I feel like we're definitely on the right course here.
All right. I'm probably gonna follow up next Monday or Tuesday with you guys, if that's okay, to see where we are in that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Bobby. Yeah, please keep it, Paul. Please keep us apprised. You don't have to. We don't expect you to share any sensitive health information, and we understand that this is a period of transition in many ways. So just let us know, and we'll do our best to work with the circumstances as you guys are. That being said, I'm going to ask Andrea to share our proposal. Will move on now away from the COVID-19 impact bargaining portion of this session and move forward to our general contract proposals. Just a little bit of background. Some of you may know that this 2020, this year, the entire collective bargaining agreement is up for discussion. GAU has already offered up a proposal regarding the healthcare article, mainly preserving the status quo. We've spoken with Dr. Sumfest, who heads Gator Grad Care and heads Gator Care in general, and she kind of shared with us what's going on financially with that organization and these different employer health plans within it. I think after that happened, we're kind of expecting, and Paul's mentioned that the university is probably going to offer up a counter proposal in light of this information. So we're awaiting that. But today we're going to offer a proposal not related, at least directly to the healthcare provisions. We're offering up a proposal with regards to Articles 8 and 20, I believe. Yes. Do you have that, Andrea?
No, I'm looking through your emails. I don't have them. Can you quickly email them to me?
Absolutely. So just bear with me while I pass this along to Andrea. And Bill, Paul, and Judy, this is the same document that we emailed before the last bargaining session we had intended. So there will be nothing new here, but let us know if you need copies of that. I just sent that, Andrea, without a subject. It's a PDF. I know you've designated a lot of my emails to go directly to your trash folder, so please check there as well.
Naturally.
Andrea, how do you do that exactly? I need more information.
Javier, we have a copy, I believe, of this document also dated 5/6. Are there any changes since you sent that through on 5/6?
There are no changes to what we proposed on 5/6.
Okay.
I did want to go over it just because, we have a lot of our membership here, so they know that what we proposed, and we can hear from them afterward. Thanks for putting that up, Andrea. And I've underlined the changes from anything that's new that we are looking to add to the contract has been underlined. There isn't a lot physically in terms of what we're adding. I think substantively it's a bit to digest, but we've got some reasons for it. I'll start with Article 8, which is leaves of absence. I'll preface this conversation with, we've talked about, we mentioned that GAU is interested in expanding mental health protections in this round of bargaining this year. So with that in mind, I think that the proposals we're going to make are pretty reasonable, and they're a good starting point, but I'll address those soon. I just wanted to kind of, preface the conversation before I kind of explain myself. We are proposing an amendment to Section 8.1, subsection A, to include, to kind of absolve an employee of a requirement to perform assigned duties if they present mental as well as physical illness. They have to be disabled or otherwise unable to perform them because of injury. So simply a mental illness diagnosis is not sufficient to kind of fall under 8.1A. But if your mental illness prevents you from doing your job in a satisfactory manner or results in disability, then 8.1A would trigger. I would also argue that, mental illness to some extent is physical illness, and there's really no way around that. But if we can move on, Andrea, that's more of a language change in my mind. This is also a kind of a small language change I think the university can make to kind of, again, reinforce certain ideas or principles that promote general welfare amongst GAs and their mental health. Basically asking the university to allow and encourage the use of personal time. Personal time you can use for whatever reason. But for stress relief and burnout prevention, specifically mental health days. So this would involve PIs, kind of encouraging PIs and departments to tell their grad students or their graduate assistants, hey, you've been working out a lot, feel free to use this time. That's what it's there for. Again, just as a language change in my mind, not substantive. You weren't prevented from doing this previously, but this small language change to the contract kind of sets a tone for GAs. 8.3 is a big change. I will mention that we took a look at the top 10 universities and public universities in the United States. I think 8 of the 10 or 7 of the 10 offer some form of paid leave, usually in the amount of 6 weeks, sometimes more. Many of those universities are in the University of California system, which I think is seen as exceptional by many administrations, but University of Michigan, University of Virginia, which are also competing for spots in the top 5, also offer these benefits. So we're requesting paid leave in the amount of 6 weeks. I understand the university is in the process and has been in communication with the faculty about this, in the process of modifying the leave structure. So we kind of thought it was an opportune time to have this conversation. And I think this is a conversation that comes up probably every full book bargaining year. So just change the word unpaid to paid and the section title to paid leave. I don't think that this would apply to many GAs. I don't think GAs are coming to school with the intention of having children. Some do, and this is something that universities nationwide are beginning to account for. If we can move on. I don't think I have any other changes to section 8.3. But that actually concludes all the changes that we're proposing for Article 8. For Article 20.3, we really like this provision. I think it also has some benefits for the university. Traditionally, this provision kind of allowed for the initiation of a kind of a workplace investigation when there was a potential violation of safety or health rules within the university or a lab or a PI's or a grad student's workspace. We want to expand that to include workspaces that kind of that are substantially and detrimentally affect mental health of the employee. So something that a PI might be doing, or anything that can kind of compromise the mental health of a graduate assistant, but in a substantial and detrimental way. So what we really like about this provision is that I think that it can potentially protect the university from liability. It can prevent disaster scenarios where a GA might take their life later down the line when some quick intervention from the department or the university administration would have prevented something like that, would have helped put in place protocols with specific PIs who are problem PIs. I think that the mental health crisis in universities is not specific to the University of Florida. I think University of Florida's administrators, I think even Paul has recognized that this is kind of a systemic problem. And I think that with the contract, we want to implement wholesale change. A lot of these changes are going to occur, frankly, at the department level. I think that this kind of provision sets up that kind of opportunity. We ask and understand that we would prefer anonymity in these situations when possible, right? Perhaps the PI institutes a rule or regulation or engages in behavior that is problematic and compromises the mental health of GAs substantially and detrimentally all throughout their lab or all throughout the GA workspace. I understand that some PIs work with one graduate assistant and that you can't really maintain anonymity there. But I think that this rule would have a lot more effect if those protections are encouraged and put forth. So I'd like you all to really consider something, at least some kind of apparatus to expand safety and health investigations to include mental health issues. I don't think it's a big ask, and like I said, I think it can save the university money. It can potentially save someone's life down the line. And I think that this is one of the things that we can put in a contract. This is a very general change that'll benefit all departments. I think that's all I have to say about 20.3. Can you move on to the next change, Andrea?
Javier, do you mind if I just ask a question about that section we just talked about?
Not at all, Brooke. Please go ahead.
Great. So I agree with the concept of encouraging safe work conditions, fully support that, and we know there's definitely an epidemic in terms of mental health that we need to do everything we can to support everyone. Just want to talk about your language here as it refers to part 2, where it says, if I just read this sentence again, whenever a bargaining unit employee reports a condition that he or she feels represents substantially and detrimentally affects mental health of the employee, so we're decoupling that from safety or health rules or regulations to specifically, like the example you gave, a PI who is engaging in some misconduct that causes them to be affected, their mental health to be affected. There certainly are mechanisms for that in place. I just want us to think about and maybe talk briefly about the way this is worded as it relates to individuals. And I'm speaking from personal experience here of my own extended family, a member who had a mental health issue that was in no way affected or created by their work environment. And so in terms of how this is worded, condition where a person would have a mental health illness that may not necessarily be related to the work environment, where it uses the term condition here, which could be a variety of different conditions external to the work environment, internal to the work environment. And in my own personal example that I used, there was a significant mental health issue, but it had no bearing or no cause attributed to the work environment. So I just want us to understand that could be a challenging scenario there to investigate, or just maybe to get you to clarify that a bit more. And the anonymity, I understand to the extent possible, but that to appropriately address and resolve an issue, that would be very difficult to achieve there, I think.
Thank you, Brooke. I am understanding. I added substantially and detrimentally to kind of limit the scope of when this is applicable, right? I think that merely, inherently there's a lot of stress to this job. Even PIs who do a good job of kind of regulating the workspace can't avoid the existence of stress. The provision only triggers an investigation. So it's not like the university can, at that point, the university may be, under the current language, may be required to start an investigation. But if it determines that the mental health of the employee is not substantially or detrimentally affected, I think that ends the inquiry. I also think that, I'm hoping with qualifiers like substantial, detrimental, we kind of weed out some of these scenarios where someone is reporting a mental health issue completely unrelated to the workplace. That's not the aim that we're looking for. So if we're open to any language changes you propose, I did keep that in mind and try to kind of limit the scope of this to very specific, what was the term? Conditions arising from the workplace. So we can add something like that to kind of hone it in. I don't want to overburden the university in this respect. On the contrary, I like I mentioned, I think that this is a potential way to reduce liability down the line. And I'll reiterate, as you mentioned about anonymity, I understand that would be hard in some instances. I don't think that from our end you will see a lot of bickering about good faith attempts to remain anonymous. We understand that in many instances, and that's why I add this line, to the extent possible, it's just not possible. So I appreciate your comments, and we're open to working with language changes. I'm happy to see that they aren't like substantive, like no, we're not going to do anything like this. But that's kind of, we think it's a small step that can go a long way in preventing serious disasters.
Yeah, maybe one thing that can be considered, I mean, if there's a hang up on the word anonymous, I mean, I'm sure we would be willing to consider replacing that with confidential, right? So maybe HR is aware of the GA's identity, but the department is not. We can, I'm sure, find a way to make that work, or consider doing so at least.
That's a good point, Bobby.
I appreciate your feedback there and talking through that. I think I'm also going to express some caution here about the concept that an investigation might conclude that someone's mental health was substantially and detrimentally affected. The reason I express caution there is because I don't think we, the university, nor you, GAU, would want an investigator to make determinations about someone's mental health. Obviously, and I know that's not what you're suggesting, but in terms of how the language is written here, we would solely leave that up to medical professionals and healthcare to determine level of impact of mental health. We would focus on the conduct and how it is measured against the university regulation of the individual person who would be the respondent, if you will, to that allegation versus measuring the mental health of the individual. So I know that's probably not what you intended, but just a word of caution on my part there.
I appreciate that, Brooke. Yeah, so the way I read it, and I agree, I don't think that the university as a state entity should be coming to these designations. That is potentially dangerous, I think. I think that there's a real cost to diagnostic labeling, but I think it's written, I don't think the university even agrees by merely investigating or concluding an investigation with part one. If to trigger this provision, an employee must report a condition that they feel is a potential violation of safety and health and regulations or substantially affects their mental health. I'm not sure that by conducting an investigation, the employer is coming to the same agreement. They're kind of, and I don't think that the 20.3 requires a conclusion at all, a specific conclusion as to one of those two prongs, right? I'm not sure how you guys, do these investigations currently. If you issue a report that said, yes, a safety or health regulation was violated, by the PI or by the department. So that's something that we're definitely willing to kind of confine. I'm okay with adding 100% okay with adding language that doesn't designate that the university has found that someone's mental health was detrimentally affected. We just want to open the door for an investigation, for a conversation, for a reduction of liability, for action. So we can definitely work around the language to kind of trim it a little bit. It's not my intention, again, to have the university rule on these issues. I don't think any GA wants the university to determine anything like that about their mental health. So we're definitely open to those kinds of suggestions.
Okay, thank you.
Paul or Judy, anything else to add about 20.3?
Not for me.
Okay.
No.
Okay, Andrea, can you please move on? So 20.7 is okay, I remember. So 20.7 is something that I understand has come up in previous bargaining sessions. And I know that we're talking about healthcare coverage now, and some potential changes. This is tangentially, obviously, related to healthcare. We're requesting the continuation of health coverage for students who I'm sorry, let me read this language one more time. I don't know if y'all can see, but my cat has joined the discussion. It's a bit of a distraction. So it's for the continuation of health coverage for 9-month employees into summer C. If they are scheduled to return in the fall, or if they're eligible for reappointment in the fall. It's something that's been discussed before. It's just in these uncertain times with COVID-19, a lot of people are leaving and going into kind of an unknown workplace, an unknown workforce, an unknown economy. That kind of protection is something that we'd want the university to consider. Bobby, I don't know if you want to add anything else. I know that you're the one who may have negotiated this in the past with the university.
Yeah, so in the past, before there was no way to remove a GA from their health plan, if they graduated in the spring, it automatically continued into summer C, just because there was no mechanism to remove them from the plan. And during the last full book, Gator Care or HR was able to find a mechanism to do so. So it switched from allowing the GA to continue having health insurance in the summer directly following their graduation to providing them COBRA. And this is a tough time for GAs, you know, even those who are going into the academic field. A lot of times they are not employed by their new institution over the summer, so they're sort of stuck in this weird gap without insurance. So I guess like one of their only options is to, you know, wrap themselves in bubble wrap and hope nothing happens. You know, so we're hoping to maybe make that transition a little easier for our members and members of our bargaining unit.
So I think we've understood this request, and Bobby is correct that historically people kind of sort of stayed on their health insurance because we didn't know about it. The HR systems didn't allow the university to learn whether or not someone had completed their employment and hence completed their coverage at the time of graduation. But, you know, past errors are not the same as precedents. So, I mean, I think the fact that some of those may indeed have slipped through in previous times is not really germane. This is, I think, from the perspective of the university, very much a legal question. We'll have to get Ryan involved. My understanding is that we're basically not allowed to cover people who are not employees. And so when graduate assistants graduate, they cease to be employees. And this is an employee health plan. So I mean, I'm certain the university would be willing to talk about it if it's legal.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, just off the top of my head right now, as you were saying that, if that is indeed the case, that legally they, you know, because perhaps it's not legal to receive the tax breaks you get for providing employee health insurance if the person's not an employee, right? So that creates legal issues. One possibility is, you know, health savings accounts could be established and money could be put into the health savings account that would cover Cobra for that summer semester, right? I think there are ways to make this work legally, right? The HSA idea is just off the top of my head. But you know, HSA money remains with you even if you leave the employer. So I mean, if the amount that Cobra costs is invested into each employee's HSA, that's one way we can make this happen.
Thanks for your comments, Bobby. Those are specific to 20.7. Paul, if you have anything to add, or Judy or Brooke in general about that concludes our proposal. If you have anything to mention about the proposal in its entirety, we'll certainly entertain that now. And then I'll open the floor to GAs if they want to add anything. I am not
As
here.
I mentioned at the front end, I appreciate knowing that these haven't changed since you delivered them prior, and we have them. We have received them. We understand them. We think, and pending bill situation, we'll review them and make counter proposals or otherwise respond timely.
Thank you, Paul. Any GAs, anyone in the membership have anything to mention about these proposals? If you can, we're also caucusing afterward, so if you just rather tell us, that's okay too. You can just wait. But I did want to open the floor to everyone. This is a public forum.
Yes, I had a question, if that's okay.
Go ahead, Kimberly.
Yeah, hi, I'm Kimberly, the mental health chair for GAU. I just had a question overall for the administration and advocates. Has there been any discussion or I guess like meetings or committee meetings about supporting graduate students in mental health care, considering COVID-19 and also the current political and racial climate?
So if I could just make a general statement, I'm a part of a group that works closely with the Dean of Students, and which includes counseling and wellness and the care team you may be familiar with. And I know that there has been, although there may not have been any specific initiatives that I as an HR person have been involved in the last 3 months, I know that there's a very focused awareness on providing support to graduate students during this time. I see it day in and day out in terms of their support, but I think your question is a great question. I just don't know if there have been any unique or special initiatives put forward in the last few months.
Hey, Brooke, thanks for chiming in. I actually have a question. So I can tell the university definitely is trying to take undergrads into consideration because grad students were forced to do that cognito training that I emailed you about that you haven't gotten back to me about. So, you know, while undergrads, you know, are being taken into consideration, perhaps undergraduate students probably have not been, as far as I can tell here.
Thank you, Andrea, and I do apologize. What we're trying to do in terms of response to your question is get the detailed edict, if you will, from the Board of Governors. So the reason the university has instituted cognito training is based on directive from the Board of Governors, and we've been working with the Dean of Students office to actually get that language so we can share that with this group. I know there was an announcement that went out from the provost and the vice president of HR about cognito training, and I'm not clear on whether or not that was received by the members. I do intend to forward that message to you so that you could see it and maybe determine if anyone actually received it in your group. But we are also working to identify the mandate that came from the Board of Governors so that we can share that with you as well. And I apologize for the delay in closing the loop on that with you. And to your point about support for graduate students, To the degree that I can influence that discussion in my conversations with the Dean of Students, I'll certainly commit to do that. I'm not as involved directly in day-to-day initiatives that they may be working on, but I do talk to them on a weekly basis.
For the specific committee that you're on with the care team and the counseling center, are there any graduate student representation there on the committee?
There are, I'm trying to think, there's a group called the Behavioral Consultation Team, which is an administrative group, and it doesn't have any representatives of students who participate in it. But again, I'm in a fairly limited involvement with that, with the Dean of Students office, and so I'm not as familiar with what they have ongoing on a day-to-day basis. But I'm happy to inquire about that. And you probably know more about what they're doing and efforts they're taking for undergraduate students than I'm aware of. But I will certainly relay that coming out of the context of this bargaining session to them, that it's something that's important and that there's a desire to see more support for graduate students, and see if I can connect you with resources or initiatives that I just don't know about. That's quite possible.
Okay, thank you.
So I would just add one small thing in my faculty hat as distinct from administrative obligation. The Cognito training or other trainings that are directed towards faculty with suggestions or recommendations regarding certain things to observe, certain conditions, certain behavioral attributes, things like that that are perhaps reason to intervene, to talk to a student, to call in other resources. I have not seen one single place where that was directed to faculty in a way that sounded like they were only supposed to worry about the undergraduates. All of those things are directed to faculty with regards to students. All students, professional, graduate, undergraduate, and faculty are expected to be responsive to observable stresses or mental or emotional health circumstances experienced by their students across the board. No specific reference to undergraduates only. I don't quite understand.
Yeah, I mean, I recently did the Cognito training, and the simulation is an avatar of a white faculty member speaking to undergraduates, like very clearly, not graduate students. So, I mean, you know, I don't know if you've done the Cognito training, but it's honestly very uncomfortable. I also have expressed to the Dean of Students that I do not feel it is our responsibility as graduate students with limited resources to provide that, you know, support to students when we don't receive that same support. So like, we're not in the best position to be, you know, subsidizing the lack of the university's mental health care professional access on campus. Like, that is not, like, I, you know, as a good person, I will try to connect my students to those resources, but it is not I can't be held liable for that. And I've expressed that to the Dean of Students, to Heather White, and yeah, so on deaf ears that fell upon.
Well, you know, again, I'm not trying to talk at cross purposes here, but as a faculty member, I certainly don't consider myself remotely expert in diagnosing or observing or understanding stressed behavior on behalf of a student. I mean, I like to think I'm reasonably good at that. I'm experienced, I'm old, I'm grumpy, I've got lots of attributes that may make that less effective than it could be. But as an employee of the university and as a professor here, I certainly accept that I'm responsible for observing that in my students. And I don't understand why you would think that teaching assistants specifically, who face the same classroom kind of context as many faculty, would be uniquely absolved from that obligation.
I mean, I think that this goes to the question of, like, you know, when the bargaining team, you have bargaining team, you know, there's always like this blurred line of like, oh no, you're students, oh no, you're employees. Like, I think that this definitely falls under that kind of like umbrella of ambiguity here. Like, I do not feel personally as an underrepresented minority graduate student on this campus that I should be giving resources and going out of my way and racking my brain and just adding to my emotional labor why I should be forced to do these things. Like, it just doesn't, I just don't feel that's reasonable, especially when the university does not provide resources to graduate students, adequate access to mental health care. So I just feel like there's like a double standard going on here that I just want to point out, that these cognito trainings are not taking into consideration, and that this is really just a larger issue surrounding mental health issues on campus that, you know, I feel like we're trying to address here in this bargaining session. And I just, you know, want to kind of, this is a very nuanced conversation. There's a lot of things going on here, and that's definitely part of this conversation. So just want to make people aware of that.
And I would say, just sort of like to expand on what Audrina was saying, it's also just like an infrastructure issue that's like really kind of paramount to UF in terms of focusing on the undergraduate experience and the undergraduate sort of development. So we see that with access to the counseling center, where graduate students have very like limited sort of like any sorts of sense of like advocacy and care with the counseling center. And in addition to like also looking at marginalized mental health particular care, those groups are overwhelmingly undergrad, right? So those include the groups that the counseling center hosts, as well as former groups from the LGBTQ multicultural office. And so that also kind of creates a constrainment because graduate students also teach undergrads, and as well as they're more than likely going to consider the waiting list a little bit more differently for undergraduate students. So when we're even getting into like resources in terms of like the fee and the student like development, event planning, project fees, like what that goes to in terms of the different student organizations, like all of that is really allocated towards, again, undergrads. And we're looking at Student Governmental Association. There's only a handful of graduate spots that are allowed. So overwhelmingly, I would say that it's pretty much like the bloodline. It would have to be the undergraduate support and experience. And so like when we're getting into mental health, it becomes even more exaggerated.
I really appreciate your comments today, and I hope you understand that there's not a perfect solution here. I'm sure everyone knows that there's not a perfect solution, but one option that graduate assistants have access to as employees and students is the EAP. The university's EAP structure allows for people to anonymously reach out to a provider through a network, and encourage you, if you're familiar with that, to access that. Again, it's not a perfect solution. It doesn't come close to comparing to the support provided by an on-site counseling wellness center, but it is another resource that adds to that support structure there. And if you need any information about EAP, or you have individuals who need access, you can point them to eap.ufl.edu. And that's something that's not available to undergrads that aren't employed, or to basically it's for employees. So
thank you for that information. And just a quick addendum too, I think for EAP, you can only use it 3 times as well.
So we rolled out a new EAP provider last year, and it does have a much expanded resource access. And so a person can see an EAP provider, consult with them up to 6 times per event. So it's not on an annualized basis as it was before. And I'd love to get some information out to the leadership of GAU so that you can think about sharing that with people that might benefit from that. It's still not perfect, but it is much more broadly expanded, and it's also available for members of the household in addition to the employee. So we're trying to look at it much more comprehensively than we have in the past. That rolled out in, wow, it's already June now. I think it rolled out in August of last year, and I welcome your feedback if you've had bad experiences or didn't feel like it was meeting your needs. We certainly welcome your feedback, but I'll provide information and resources about that.
Thank you, Brooke. That'll be helpful. We'll be in touch about that, and maybe we can compile some feedback from GAs generally about who have experience with the EAP, about what we can do to maybe tweak the program, make it more accessible. I don't have personal experience, but I think that many of our membership clearly does. So maybe we can help you all out in making that a better program for all of us. I want to thank Kimberly.
And I certainly,
I,
if I could just, I didn't mean to interrupt, but one more time,
Go for it.
I don't want to exclude the fact that you can also see Counseling Wellness Center. You can see EAP counselors, but you also through Gator Grad Care have some mental health coverage if you choose to go outside of that entire network, is my understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong. So, but your points are well taken. I do intend to talk to the Dean of Students and see if there's other initiatives that I'm not aware of that we might be able to.
There is one. There's a group that formed it was before the pandemic, Kimberly. Dr. Escato and Monica Webb and some others. We have a representative that, because we found out about the group meeting that we added, and I can see if a graduate student is represented on that committee and asked to have one. And they are looking at mental health, for graduate students, providing that. And I know that this year that it might have started spring, that they hired more wellness counselors. And I can ask our Dr. Amelia Hodge to see if they allocated certain hours to graduate students or certain counselors as well.
Thank you, Dr. Travis. That means a lot. If it was possible to, if they could expand with graduate representation with multiple identities too, that would help a lot, just to get the touch points of mental health there too as well. Kind of speaking to what Brooke was just saying in terms of counselors and sort of the expansive network, it's pretty limited actually in terms of seeking that. There's a higher coverage of seeking psychiatry, but the psychiatry, you're on a waiting list for 3 to 6 months. So going outside of the network really isn't that big of an option. So to have this committee sounds like a tremendous effort. I just hope that there can be a particular intentional care in terms of representation and voice, and to really centralize the graduate student. So thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly and Judy and Brooke. This is all very helpful information. I think some of us are learning about this kind of, not about the CWC, but I hadn't heard about this committee before. So that's interesting development, to say the least. Any final comments before we end? I think I saw someone try to get in there.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So in the same vein of mental health, referring to Article 20.3, where you were talking about, dangers in the workplace related to a GA's mental health. So there was some discussion about, the language used there. And I was wondering if, maybe we could, if it was advisable to rework that and say that we would be investigating for, a potentially abusive environment. So, the university has very tangible and defined ways of investigating, like sexual abuse, sexual harassment with Title IX. Could the same tangible steps not apply to investigating an abusive workspace, mentally, or something similar to that?
Yeah, that's a great point. And we certainly do conduct those types of investigations. So I don't want to give the impression that we're not interested in addressing those and resolving those matters, because they're unfortunate, but we have an investigative team that works through that, exactly what you're saying there. So I think the language is the key, that we just make some adjustments. So we're not gauging the impact of mental health. We're gauging the conduct of the perpetrator, if you will.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Oh, sorry, go on, Amanda.
Thank you, Ed.
Yeah, I just want to, I think what's key here is confidentiality or anonymity. That's a, being able to remain anonymous or confidential, I think would help a lot in making graduate assistants feel more comfortable coming forward and divulging emotionally hostile work environments. So just please keep anonymity and confidentiality in mind when you're discussing our proposal.
Certainly, if I can make another comment, in terms of anonymity, we may have talked about this in previous bargaining sessions over the years, but the university does maintain a compliance hotline. that provides an opportunity for people to register anonymous complaints of any variety. Obviously, if there was an abusive situation or there was some type of allegation against a faculty member for the concerns you're expressing here that came through that compliance hotline, it will be routed to human resources, and we would consider whether investigation was appropriate for what's described there. Complete anonymity is a third-party service. You can report that by phone or by email. I think they may even have a web portal that you can create an account for anonymity. So if it's okay with everyone, I'll post that link in the chat so that you can access that and share that. And that's something that is monitored on a daily basis. So there is a route right now, regardless of where we land with contract language, there's a route for people to share concerns anonymously, and we greatly encourage that.
Thank you, Brooke.
Yeah, thank you everyone for your comments. Amanda, I don't know if you plan to be a part of the caucus later, but if you can't, we will try to reach out to you about your ideas and how we can kind of implement them into the contract, because I think that that's a very valid point and helps us kind of really hone in on what we're after here. And any other final comments before we adjourn today? Thank you for that.
I'm going to make the caucus page. Like, I'm going to make a Zoom link really quickly, and I'm going to post that to the original Facebook page for this bargaining session. So just, go back to that Facebook page and that will be there.
Thank you, Andrea. So check out our Facebook for that information. And Brooke has posted that the information for the compliance hotline, their webpage on the chat. I'm planning on, or I think GAU is going to plan on sharing that via Facebook, via email to our membership as well, just as a reminder. And unless there are any final comments, I think we're ready to adjourn today.
Yeah, I just want to say, Judy, Paul, Brooke, please give Bill our best, and also thank you for your agility and being able to make this conversation, somewhat informal conversation, productive. I think that we were able to ping pong a lot of ideas around, and I know that it was last minute for you guys, so I really appreciate your agility and effort in making this happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. And I want to throw in Becky Holton there as well for helping us troubleshoot. We really appreciate your time. Our best with Bill. Our thoughts are with Bill. We hope to see him soon, and we'll be in touch about future bargaining sessions.
Good talking, everybody. Stay safe.
You all too. Thank you so much.